start off on the right foot with this new administration, something that we have not heard, particularly from House Republicans over the last 2 months here. Anderson.
And Manu, at what point does the new Congress begin, and at what point does the impeachment continue?
Well, this afternoon at 4:30 p.m., the Senate will gavel back into session, and that will be the first time Senate Democrats will officially be in the majority. Once Kamala Harris is sworn in as vice president, there will be 3 Democratic senators who will get sworn in this afternoon to give the Democrats a 50-50 Senate, 51-50 with Kamala Harris breaking the tie. And they're still working on some of the procedures and moving forward with the impeachment trial. The expectation is that it could begin within a matter of weeks, but I'm told that Democrats wanted to avoid making today about Donald Trump's impeachment trial, which is one reason why Nancy Pelosi has held back sending that article of impeachment from the House to the Senate to begin that trial, because it is going to dominate action here in the first few weeks of the Senate and could complicate, of course, getting Biden's government formed, getting his cabinet approved by the Senate. Anderson.
Manu Garaju, thanks for watching the Marine Band departing, proceeding to the Lower West Terrace Bandstand. Kate Anderson Brower joins me now. She's the author of The Residence, the insider's account of the White House residence. Kate, what are you hearing about the handover going on in the White House now? This is obviously always a kind of chaotic time in the White House, particularly in this White House in this time.
Well, I mean, it's really controlled chaos in the White House. They have 5 hours to make this move, typically between 11 o'clock. Normally, in a normal inauguration, when after there's a coffee in the Blue Room, and then the motorcade would go to Capitol Hill, and then the swearing-in would happen, and there'd be a presidential parade. In this White House, there's going to be actually a little bit more time for them to do that, because we know that Vice President Biden will be going to Arlington, and there will be a decent window. And there are about 100 staff. So these are butlers, ushers, working at a feverish pace to make this move happen, so that when the Bidens move in, you know, their toothbrushes will be on the counter in the bathroom. I mean, everything is about making it perfect. And we know there's a deep clean of the residence because of COVID, which includes, you know, vacuuming drapes, wiping baseboards, cleaning chandeliers. They take great pride in their work, and they're really the most patriotic people I've met in Washington, frankly.
And it's Kate. We'll check back in with you throughout the day. Evan, how do you think the Biden family will make this their home?
Well, they know the space very well. After all, he worked in it for 8 years. You know, I visited him in his office at the West Wing. One of the things he cared about was being able to walk down that hall to the Oval Office every morning and being in their room and being an advisor, being a voice. I think you can expect that the incoming vice president is going to play a similar role. But the other thing that you notice about that space is that he puts pieces of history there to remind himself. He had portraits of former vice presidents on his own wall because he wanted to remind himself not only of the great moments, but the frustrating moments. He would talk about how they looked at it and they would say the constraints of the job. How do I break through? So he is very much seeing himself, to borrow a phrase, he doesn't see this as doing it my way. He sees this as being a descendant of a lineage, somebody who is bearing a trust, a responsibility, and he is now moving into that sanctum sanctorum.
Here's something people might not know about Joe Biden, which is that he, although I'm sure you do, Evan, he loves real estate. Right. He started out, he loves houses. He started out in his life buying a little house that belonged to his parents, and then buying more land in Delaware. And in his spare time, he does some architectural drawings. He loves to do that. And so the White House has always been a space that he's been that he marvels at.
Yeah, he's got himself a pretty nice place now.
Now he does. Yeah, free of charge. Yeah. So the house itself has always been of great interest to him, and he redid, of course, when he was in the vice president. They did a lot of work there in the vice president's house. It's something he just loves to think about. He says it relaxes him.
It's so extraordinary, David, to see Washington on this day, given what happened some 2 weeks ago. It says so much about this country and this democracy that 2 weeks ago there was an attack on the Capitol, and despite all the unprecedented security in Washington, despite all the drama of the last 2 weeks, the peaceful transfer of power has occurred.
There is an awesome majesty to it that, you know, we've seen our democracy tested, but it's proven resilient. And there's something awesome about the people saying, no, we're going in a different direction. We want to change direction. And to see that power enforced by our institutions, even against the kinds of pressures that they've felt, it underscores why this is worth working for. This is why the world admires us.
Yeah. I was thinking about the Obama inauguration and being there and that whole thing. Hope was the word then. Faith is the word now. It's different. It's more sober. It endures. We are standing by to see incoming President Joe Biden leaving church, heading to the U.S. Capitol. The inauguration will soon be underway. We'll be right back.
My name is Francisco Palier. I live in Bogota, Colombia, and I'm the master franchisee of RE/MAX. What RE/MAX does is provide an opportunity to people who are interested in opening its own real estate company. At the beginning, the pandemic hit us like every other company. And in the first of those 6 months, we were not allowed to help buyers or sellers. So the impact was direct. Since the pandemic, what we have found is that people have become aware of where they are living and spending a lot of time now. And it had recreated a new movement from the big cities to small towns because people want more space. People want to see green in their house. So in a large period of time, we believe the transaction volume will be steady, or moreover, it will increase due to the pandemic. I love my country. I think it's a great place to live. I think we are not getting back to how it was before the pandemic. I think we gotta create the future of what's coming. This is something that we gotta do together. Be responsible and act like a
Icio urona ni cia meharĩrĩria ma igongona rĩu rĩa kwĩhĩtithia President Joe Biden kana President Muthure Joe Biden na nimegũkorwo makĩhĩtithio mena mũnini wake kana ũrĩa ũgũkorwo gĩtuĩka Vice President Kamala Harris na nĩ igongona rĩgũkorwo rĩgĩtabanĩrio kũrĩa Capitol Hill na meharĩrĩria no marathiĩ na mbere na ngona ũgitĩri nĩ wa gĩkĩro kĩa igũrũ biũ na andũ aingĩ nĩ megũkorwo metereire kuona igongona rĩu ũrĩa rĩgũkorwo rĩgĩthiĩ na mbere. Kamala Harris gũkorwo akĩhĩtithio nĩ Justice Sonia na thutha wa ũguo Joe Biden nĩ gũkorwo akĩhĩtithio ta president wa 46 kana 46th president wa America nĩ gũkorwo akĩhĩtithio nĩ mũcirithania mũnene. Thutha wa ũguo Biden nĩ gũkorwo akĩarĩria andũ kana nĩ gũkorwo akĩheana speech yake. Nĩ igongona rĩgũkorwo rĩetereirwo mũno na rĩetereirwo nĩ thĩ ng'ima tondũ America nĩ bũrũri ũmwe ũkoragwo wĩroreirwo nĩ andũ aingĩ kana nĩ mabũrũri maingĩ biũ na mbica icio rona no meharĩrĩria tu ma igongona rĩu rĩrĩa rĩgũkorwo rĩgĩthiĩ na mbere ciahanda thaa thita cia mĩaraho kũrĩa bũrũri wa America. Nĩ wega ngorwo tukorwo tukiona kiria kirathie na mbere mwena ucio na tukorwo tugithie na mbere gukwira maria marathie na mbere o tugithiaga na mbere gweterera.
And started in 2017, so this blue tweed coat that we're seeing, and underneath there's a matching dress, were both done by this young new designer. And then also Kamala Harris, I'm going to make sure I get the names right. She's also wearing young designers. She's making a statement here as well, wearing two young black designers. One is from Baton Rouge, Christopher John Rogers, and Sergio Hudson is from South Carolina. Again, I think we're returning to the space here today when we talk about these clothes. And it is important. People say, oh, it's not important. But it is. Michelle Obama really turned heads with her fashion, and she did so very intellectually. She supported and championed young emerging designers, many diverse designers. She showcased different kinds of American fashion, and didn't sort of just stick to the standard bearers. And as we see today, the incoming First Lady, the incoming Vice President are both reflecting that new feeling. You know, Melania Trump left Washington today wearing Chanel, which is a French designer. She arrived wearing that blue Ralph Lauren suit we all remember, but she wore lots of foreign designers. She wore Dolce & Gabbana in her official portrait. So this is a return to American designers, and I will say both gentlemen, we can't leave out the gentleman, President-elect Joe Biden and second gentleman-elect Doug Emhoff are both wearing Ralph Lauren, an iconic American designer. Wolf.
All right, I feel like I should be asking you, who are you wearing today, but I'm not going to ask you that question. Kate, I'll ask Kate Anderson-Brower. Kate, give us a little sense of what all this means.
Well, I think that it's going to be a return to what we saw with Michelle Obama. You know, she wore famously Jason Wu to the inauguration in 2009. And so we're seeing both Kamala Harris and Dr. Biden representing female designers, American designers. That was very important to Dr. Biden. I know that she wore an American designer today because, after all, today is about celebrating our democracy, the peaceful transfer of power, the pomp and ceremony of today. You know, we don't have a Buckingham Palace. We don't have the kind of celebrations that they have in other countries around the world. This is that moment in American history. Everybody wants to celebrate America. And so it only makes sense to be wearing American designers and highlighting women. And I think that, different parts of America that maybe has been overlooked in the past 4 years, we're going to be seeing more of that.
Yep, I'm sure we will. We're only moments away right now from seeing dignitaries and guests arriving on Capitol Hill. Right now, here's a live look at the scene here in Washington as we get closer and closer to the inauguration ceremony.
Between what is hoped for and what can be, there's a bridge. Between endangered and protected, there's a bridge.
No gukuririkania ati meharĩrĩria maigongona rĩa kwĩhĩtithia Joe Biden ta president mwerũ wa Amerika meharĩrĩria no marathie na mbere na nĩ megũkorwo magĩtabanio kũrĩa Capitol Hill. Ririkana igongona rĩrĩ kuma mwaka-inĩ wa 1937. Igongona rĩrĩ rĩa kwĩhĩtithia president mwerũ wa US rĩtabanagio tariki 20 mweri wa Januari, na tariki ĩno 20 igigwira muthenya wa kiumia. Igongona riri ritwaragwo mbere na muthenya umwe na rigatabanio muthenya wa mwambĩrĩrio tariki 21. Igongona riri ritabanagio gatagati ga thikũ 72 na 78 thutha wa gĩthurano gĩa president gũtabanio. Nĩ wega tũkorwo tũgĩcoka CNN tũthiĩ na mbere kuona kũrĩa maũndũ marathiĩ na mbere kũrĩa US.
going to be warmed up. You can see the lectern there. I'm told that's a heated lectern. There's some type of a heating device in there to keep him warm, which is certainly understandable as he'll be delivering an address that we're told will be about 20 minutes or so in length. But Wolf, even as this is happening, from his perch there, he'll be looking across Washington, seeing the seat of government, his new government. And what is happening right now at this hour, there are acting secretaries, acting agency heads being at the ready to take the reins. This is because President Biden will take office, unlike any of his predecessors, without any cabinet secretaries confirmed. The Senate has not confirmed a single cabinet nominee. Barack Obama, when he was president, had 6 nominees confirmed. President Trump had 2 nominees confirmed. So that means there will be acting attorney general and acting defense secretary. But the Biden team wanted to keep the names of most of these individuals secret, I am told, until after the noon hour, until this afternoon. So there would not be any interference by Trump officials still in the government. So for the next 2 hours or so, this is still President Trump's government. So this is something that is happening behind the scenes quietly now. These acting secretaries will be in position to assume power this afternoon, and that's for continuity of government. So one top person here is the Surgeon General, and the outgoing Surgeon General has submitted his resignation. Jerome Adams, who's become a household name to many of us in the coronavirus fight. There will be an acting Surgeon General appointed and working this afternoon before the Biden nominee, Dr. Vivek Murthy, can be named. And even as we're speaking here, Wolf, the weather is actually strange, I can tell you now. A bit of some snow flurries coming, and it certainly is above freezing, but up here at this altitude where we are, and really about the same height as where President Biden will be, a lot of things in the atmosphere here, but it is a sunny day, so certainly, could be far worse weather-wise. We'll see if that impacts his speech. Wolf?
Yeah, I suspect it won't. He's going to be delivering this. I mean, they do have those heaters up there as well, as I remember having spent some time over the years covering the inauguration. John King, there's no doubt that priority number one for the incoming president will be dealing with this COVID pandemic that is getting worse and worse, even as there are these 2 vaccines available.
And Jeff makes a very important point about the urgency then to get the Biden team in place. Obviously, you want the Secretary of State, you want the Defense Secretary, you want the Department of Homeland Security Secretary in for big national security decisions. But what the new president needs first and foremost, in many ways, is his new coronavirus team, his new healthcare team. And so they are pushing Congress to move as quickly as possible on that because not only is it a new team, it is a very new approach. President Trump ignored the pandemic. President Trump ignored science. President Trump resisted advice from his advisors to be more aggressive, to use more power of the federal government, and essentially left so much up to the states. Now, the states do have to do a great deal. It is the state responsibility to distribute and administer the vaccines. But what the Biden team wants to do, Wolf, is surge in a backup army, surge in a crisis team. If one state is having a particular problem, have people who can go help them out, ramp up and keep a closer eye on production and distribution. We'll have a Democratic president. So across the government, you'll have a more activist government. But especially when it comes to the pandemic, as we watch over the course of this first 100 days, can they get those 100 million vaccines distributed and administered? Can they help states with other efforts? The Biden wants to do a lot to help get schools the resources to reopen across the country. To do that, you need your team. And so we will focus a lot over the next several days on the cabinet secretaries, but the assistant secretaries, the deputy secretaries, the number 2s, the number 3s, and all the way down matter critically as we have, again, we're going to talk about the thematic change. We'll talk about the personalities and the leadership change, the history of Joe Biden's inauguration and Kamala Harris being the first woman and the first woman of color as vice president. But the pieces of government, the important pieces of government, that will be done in the weeks ahead. And again, Joe Biden respects the government in a way Donald Trump never did. And to have respect for your government, to kick it into gear, you need your people.
He certainly does. And he's so much experience, 8 years as a vice president, 30 plus years as a U.S. Senator. He knows Washington. He knows the nature of this business. One of the most consequential inaugurations in American history gets underway very, very soon. We're keeping a very close eye on the Capitol as all the VIPs are arriving. Stay with us for the big entrances, the oaths, the inaugural address, and so much more. It's all ahead.
gakuririkane ati mau ni meharĩrĩria ma kwĩhĩtithia kwa President Muthure Joe Biden niwe wahotire Trump ithurano-inĩ cia mwaka wa 2020 ucio ni mweri wa Novemba mwaka muhituku na Biden wo gukorwo gĩtuĩka president wa 46 wa America kana 46th president wa America thutha wa Trump uria ugukorwo ukiuma kana uria umire muthenya wa muthe White House na Trump ndagukorwo agithie igongona-inĩ rĩrĩ rĩa kwĩhĩtithio kwa Joe Biden. Trump niwe president wa gatatu wa America kwaga guthie igongona rĩrĩ rĩa kwĩhĩtithia president wa America na ndagika kana ithaa rĩmwe rĩhĩtũku Trump nĩ tuonire akiuma White House na guthie kuria kwao South Florida na ni agukorwo atungitwo ni aria mamunyitaga mbaru kuria Florida no twetereire igongona riu rikorwo rikiambiriria. Igongona riri ritafanagio thaa thita na no nginya rikorwo riratafanio tariki 20 January na rikoretwo rigitafanio kuma 1937 na ugikorwo ati muthenya uyu wa kwihitithia ni wakorwo ati ni muthenya wa kiumia kana wagwira muthenya wa kiumia huria andu America mekaga ati no nginya makorwo makirarithĩria kana makorwo ati makihitithia kana kwihitithia president ucio muthenya ucio wa mirongo kana tariki 21 igongona ria kwihitithia president rihanikaga mithenya 72 nginyagia 78 thutha wa githurano na igongona riri rihanikaga kuria Washington DC kuria Capitol Building na igongona ria muthenya wa muthi turona ati no meharĩrĩria marathie na mbere. Bica icio turona no andu tu marehariria na tukona na ni hau kabere tukuonete ati ugitiri ni uroretwo na njira nene muno kuria America. Ririkana Joe Biden ni akoretwo tetine gwa kahinda kanene tondu Joe Biden niwe president ugukorwo agituika president wa 46 kuria America na bica ciorona ni cia meharĩrĩria tu na igongona rĩrĩ gukorwo rikihanika ciehanda thaa thita cia miaraho kuria bururi wa America kuria Washington DC Capitol Hill na ni meharĩrĩria tu marathi na mbere. Kiroko kio muthi kuria America Joe Biden ni egukoretwo athiete kanitha kuria St Matthews na thutha oguo ni egukorwo agithie kuria Capitol Hill gukorwo akehitithio megukorwo makehitithio hamwe na munini wake kana uria gukorwo gituika vice president wa America Kamala Harris na nitukorwo tukiona maundu mau na nitukorwo tugikurehera bica icio imwe kwa imwe na ni wega tukorwo tugicoka kuria tuone kiria CNN menakio.
Witness the transfer of power. It's not a peaceful transfer of power, but it is a transfer. Pence will be there along with former Presidents Obama and George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, so many other officials and dignitaries from both political parties. I want to go now to CNN's Arlette Saenz because Arlette, Joe Biden, President-elect Biden has just gotten word from a particular politician wishing him well.
A politician who he is very close with, and that is President Obama. He tweeted just a short while ago a photo of the two of them in the White House and said, "Congratulations to my friend, President Joe Biden." He's getting ahead of himself a little bit since he won't be president for a few more hours, but he added, "This is your time." Now, this is a relationship that was forged during those 8 years they spent together in the White House. They didn't start off particularly close. They ran against each each other during the 2008 presidential campaign. But over those 8 years, as they spent that time working together in the White House, they became incredibly close. Their families became close. You know, they often had that weekly lunch just between the two of them as they were trying to work on the business of leading the White House. And over the course of the presidential campaign, you saw President Obama out there giving this personal testimony of what President-elect Biden would be like in the Oval Office. He has seen him firsthand, up close perhaps more than anyone else, operating in the White House. And so President Obama will be among the ex-presidents who are on hand here today for Biden's inauguration. You also see George W. Bush as well as Bill Clinton. And then the former presidents and the soon-to-be President Biden will then make their way over to Arlington National Cemetery, where they will be laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. So a moment of unity among those ex-presidents who will be on hand here today with the soon-to-be President Joe Biden. And I also just want to give you a little perspective of where we are right now. I'm currently standing on the lawn on the west front of the Capitol. This is an area that is normally filled by hundreds, even thousands of ticketed guests. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, so much of this inauguration is scaled back. So what you are seeing just right behind me is members of Congress starting to come into the ticketed area to watch as Biden will be inaugurated as the 46th president in just a short time.
All right, Arlette Saenz, thank you so much. Let's go now to CNN's Caitlin Collins. And Caitlin, normally for correspondents such as yourself, this would be an opportunity to do governor spotting, to show off how much you know about the noted politicians from around the country and what they look like. The challenge is a little tougher this year because they're all wearing masks.
Yeah, it is. But, Jake, we did go down. We saw some of the names that are already on the seats waiting for those governors and other guests to get here. Of course, a lot of Democratic lawmakers, but even some allies of President Trump's are going to be here. According to what we just looked at when we looked at the seating, Jake, that includes Kristi Noem, of course, the governor of South Dakota, a big ally of the president who's often been in the Oval Office, and she is expected to be here. Her seat is among a few other governors, including Arizona's Doug Ducey, who, of course, the president feuded with in the aftermath of the election because he also did not do the president's bidding. But that's several other guests who are going to be here, of course, in a socially distanced manner, Jake.
All right, we're watching right now as a VIP pulls up to the Capitol. We're not sure who it is, but obviously the person is coming with some sort of law enforcement protection, and we will watch to see who it is. Manu Raju, you're at Capitol Hill. Tell us what you're seeing.
Yeah, right in front of me, a huge motorcade. This is probably more than one dignitary at the moment. I don't have a glimpse of who it is. It looks like Sonia Sotomayor, is Elena Kagan, the Supreme Court justices are walking in. There's Brett Kavanaugh also walking in. So we did expect several of the Supreme Court justices to attend today's festivities. And we're also expecting momentarily the arrival of the former presidents, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. We did see also George W. Bush pull up here along with his wife Laura, and we're expecting the former Vice President Dan Quayle also to be in attendance. Now, Mike Pence, as we know, is coming here today. We don't expect him to come in front of the doors that we are, but we do expect him here. Of course, a big absence. Donald Trump not here at the moment, but all not planning to come, of course, but many former top Republicans in attendance, lawmakers, and former presidents, Bush and the like, justices who were nominated by Republican presidents, all here in the show of support for this transition of power that we're about to witness here, guys.
All right, Manu Raju on Capitol Hill for us. I think, Dana, that was Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor that we saw walking into the Capitol there. Sonia Sotomayor, the first Latina to be appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. She will be swearing in Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, who, of course, will be the first black and South Asian woman to become the vice president.
That image alone is going to be something. To see those two women standing next to one another when we have seen, man after man, not only taking the oath, but giving the oath. And the historical moment for those two is going to be remarkable. And, look, those images that we're looking at, was not an easy decision for some of those involved in planning to make. There was some pressure for Joe Biden, never mind the security risks that went along with the attack on the Capitol 2 weeks ago. But just because of the pandemic, there was concern about doing this. But the soon-to-be president, Biden, and people around him said it was essential to show the country, show the world the normalcy that this will mean and the normalcy that they hope Biden and his presidency will bring and return to America. And we're seeing more people get out of the car.
Another VIP pulling up to the Capitol. It is Michelle Obama, the former First Lady of the United States. Michelle Obama wearing a mask. How you doing? Spotting celebrities and VIPs and politicians a little bit more challenging in the age of COVID. There's President Obama as well, I believe. And Obama, obviously the presence of Michelle and Barack Obama, not a surprise at Joe Biden's inauguration, but still a welcome sight as we note the transition of power. There will be Republican presidents here as well, including George W. Bush.
That's right. And can you imagine getting inside the head of the Obamas, particularly Barack Obama right now? He worked really hard to make this moment happen. He defied the norms of former presidents because he felt that he had to, because Donald Trump did way too much of that in campaigning very aggressively for his vice president to be able to be here today to take the oath as the 46th president of the United States. And, he worked really hard 4 years ago, didn't have the same result, but this is different, and it is very, very personal.
And Michelle Obama, too.
Yeah.
She has had quite the year of coming out with her criticism of the current administration, but I just think back to 4 years ago when the two of them were in the same place and witnessing the inauguration of Donald Trump. This has got
Hillary Clinton, the
circle moment. Hillary Clinton,
former presidential candidate and secretary.
Talk about a different vibe from 4 years ago.
A full circle moment for all of them, including for Hillary Clinton.
I assume Bill Clinton will be coming out the other side. We don't have as good a view of that, but there she is. There he is, walking in with her, and Dana, we were discussing yesterday. Sorry to interrupt, Abby. We were discussing yesterday the strength it must have taken Hillary Clinton to attend the Trump inaugural 4 years ago after she won the popular vote but lost the vote after a campaign that was marked by nastiness and personal invective against her, and yet she showed up because it's important to the country. She had the strength of character to do that, strength of character that the outgoing president sadly lacks.
I cannot emphasize enough how all of those people, the Clintons, the Obamas, we will see the Bushes soon, they have all reflected on how surreal 4 years ago felt to them watching Donald Trump being elected, and even as surreal as today's events are going to be, the social distancing on the Capitol steps, the lack of a crowd. There is something about today's event that will be very normal in a very different way. You have Joe Biden, someone who is so familiar to Washington, taking the oath of office. And we should also point out the way in which Joe Biden has bookended two profound moments of history for this country as the vice president to the first black president of the United States, and now choosing for his vice president, the first black woman and South Asian woman vice president of the United States. It is a remarkable moment, but I can guarantee you the Clintons, the Obamas will have a much easier time of this inauguration than they did 4 years ago.
I was looking to see if Hillary Clinton was going to skip up the steps with excitement. Can you imagine how vindicated she feels? Again, Jake, like you were saying, 4 years ago, she did her duty. She showed up. She showed up for democracy, and she put her own feelings aside. And this is one, obviously, she is very, very happy to show up for as the former First Lady, and never mind the person who was defeated by Donald Trump.
One protocol, one tradition that President Trump did engage in, we are told by the White House outgoing Deputy Press Secretary Judd Deere, is that he did leave a letter for Joe Biden, a tradition that's been going on now for decades. Pamela Brown joins us now to tell us more about what we know about that letter. Pamela, what can you tell us?
Well, Jake, the president had a long list of to-do items while he was working in the Oval Office last night, and one of them was to write Joe Biden a letter. As you know, President Obama left him a letter when he took office. It's something he talked about with his aides repeatedly, bragged about, and he decided to write one, which was surprising to aides because of the way the president has broken tradition so far, not attending the inauguration today. As you heard, he didn't mention Joe Biden's name during his farewell address, but in this letter that was described to me as a personal note, the president basically carried on with the theme that he said today, praying for the success of the country and the new administration to care for the country. So this is a personal note that the president felt was important to leave for Joe Biden.
All right, Pamela, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Arlette, it is perhaps the most important speech of his life, the one that the president-elect is about to deliver. He did a decent job at the Democratic convention, but this is going to be a tougher task because the country is in real pain and is deeply divided. What can you tell us about the work that President-elect Biden is doing on this speech?
Well, the president-elect is aware of the gravity that in the moment that this speech will offer, as this country is really in a divided moment and also grappling with this pandemic. But I'm told that the president-elect is likely to make final tweaks on his speech until the very last minute. This is not entirely surprising in Biden world. He is a meticulous preparer for speeches big and small, and he is often known to make those changes until the very, very last minute. Now, the president-elect has been working on this speech for a few weeks with his chief speechwriter, Vinay Reddy, as well as his senior advisor, Mike Donnellan, someone who has really been central to a lot of Biden's messaging over the past few decades. And what we're expecting to hear from the president-elect today is this call for unity, something that has been a hallmark of his presidential campaign, but really takes on heightened significance in the moment that this country is currently in. Now, we also know just some background on how Biden prepares for these types of speeches. He actually has talked about how he marks up the speeches to help him with the pacing. That is something that he's likely done today as he is preparing to deliver the most important speech of his life.
All right, Arlette Saenz, thank you so much. And it's weird. We're watching the scenes coming from Capitol Hill. I just saw West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin taking some couple's picture for them with their camera. Everybody wearing masks, which is obviously quite a different sight from President Trump's departure event earlier today, where I didn't see one mask. It is a real moment of contrast. So you couldn't. So much of the Trump presidency has felt cinematic. I believe that is Ted Cruz there, right there, wearing a mask and nodding in the center of your screen. Yet another sign of President-elect Biden, extending a hand of bipartisanship and opportunity, even though the invitations go automatically to every member of the House and Senate. Biden could have made it clear, as Beto O'Rourke, the former Texas congressman, made clear, that he didn't think Cruz belonged there, given Cruz's role in challenging the election results, trying to overturn the result of the election, playing a role in the big lie that Biden didn't win and that the election could be overturned. And yet he's there, showing his face, though masked. In any case, Dana, so much of this day is so different because there just aren't crowds there. There just aren't, the American people aren't there. It's dignitaries and officials such as, who is this? Is that Laura Bush? No. Oh, I believe that's Elaine Chao and Mitch McConnell. Elaine Chao, Trump's former Secretary of Transportation, who resigned after the insurrection. Of course, her husband is the Senate Majority Leader.
Yeah, I mean, talk about uncomfortable positions, or maybe comfortable. Elaine Chao and Mitch McConnell, obviously they are fierce partisans, particularly Mitch McConnell, but this is the standard tradition that they adhere to, and Mitch McConnell, of course, has been incredibly critical of the president of late. We'll see what happens when he's of the current president. We'll see what happens when he turns to start working across the aisle with Joe Biden, whom he has worked with so many times before. There's Amy Klobuchar, who is the top Democrat on the inaugural committee. That looks like Steny Hoyer, Chuck Schumer, who, of course, is going to be, as soon as this oath is taken, he is going to be the Senate Majority Leader. He is going to be the top Democrat. He already is the top Democrat. He is going to set the agenda for the United States Senate, because it is a razor-thin majority that they have, but they have it because Kamala Harris will be vice president and therefore president of the Senate.
That alone will mark a very important and new era for this country, with Democratic control of, importantly, the procedures of the Senate and the agenda of the Senate, even as Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer are still working out how they're going to have a power-sharing agreement for some of the rest of the process in Washington. But it makes a big difference for the Joe Biden agenda, whether or not bills can be put onto the floor of the Senate and be considered by that body. So this is a big moment for Democrats and an opportunity for Democrats, but there are obviously a lot of challenges ahead. And as we watch as lawmakers come into the Capitol for this, I'm reminded that, of course, it has become pretty standard these days for some members of Congress to skip inaugurations, whether in protest or for other reasons. And I think we can expect to see at least some of that today, but as you pointed out earlier, Ted Cruz was there, Kevin McCarthy was there. These are people who just a couple days ago were trying to say that Joe Biden shouldn't be president. So they're going to be here today.
The most undemocratic actions we've seen in this thriving democracy in quite some time. This is Biden's motorcade departing from St. Matthews in downtown Washington, taking the soon-to-be first family to the Congress. Wolf, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Yeah, this is looks like the Vice President Mike Pence is arriving right now with Karen Pence, his wife. And this is really significant, John, that the Vice President, not the President, but the Vice President decided he was going to skip the farewell over at Joint Base Andrews, where the President said goodbye. Instead, he is here, and he is going to honor this tradition of a peaceful transfer of power.
There are very few Democrats watching who would have kind things to say about Mike Pence over the past 4 years, but over the past week or so, the past couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago today, he was in the Capitol building he's walking into right now during the insurrection. Many of those protesters carrying Trump-Pence banners came in chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." So yes, he is an important part of the imagery of today, the tradition of today, the respect for the process and the system of today. And there's so much change, as Abby and Dana and Jake we're just talking about, that will come of this day. By the end of this day, Joe Biden will be president. We'll have our first woman vice president, our first woman of color as vice president. The Democrats will take control of the Senate. The Biden agenda will begin. The executive orders will start flowing. And all of that is critically important, and we will go through all the big policy and personnel changes over this day, the next 100 days, into the next midterm election, and so on. But the images of today are always important, and I think all the more so, because as we watch this play out, with Vice President Pence there, with former President Bush there, with, as Jake just noted, some Republicans there who just days ago were still repeating the lies about this election, it sends an important signal to the country and an important signal to the world, which is watching today, that the system repelled the attack. The horror which we all watched at that very building 2 weeks ago will be replaced today with a remarkable ceremony, the inauguration of a new president, the inauguration of a historic vice president, and proof that the system withheld. The system, again, to use the word repelled, an attack. And so to see the band, to see the flags, to see the crowd. A lot of this is symbols, but symbols matter. Symbols send a message. I remember being at the White House on the night of 9/11 when George W. Bush came back to the White House. Many Secret Service agents, others in security, were concerned about that. He thought it was important to send the signal. Congress came back to work 2 weeks ago in that building to continue and to finish ratifying the Electoral College results. That symbol mattered. This symbol matters. And look at all those flags. Many of those flags honoring, of course, our friends and neighbors and fellow Americans who have perished from COVID. This all matters today as you pull together this remarkable, the beginning of the next chapter in Joe Biden's career. Well, imagine, Wolf, how many times did he walk into that Capitol building as a United States Senator? Today he walks in as President-elect, and he will leave as President.
Yeah, we saw those flags, thousands and thousands of flags down there in the Washington Mall. Look at all those flags. People are not there, but flags are instead. Evan Osnos, the Biden biographer, is with us right now. You know, it was really significant to me, Evan, and I want your thoughts. 24 hours or so ago, when he delivered his final speech in Delaware, and he thanked the people of Delaware, the state of Delaware, spoke about his late son, Bo. He got very emotional. You could see the tears coming down his cheek. Tell us what you anticipate now, how he's going to do in this approximately 20-minute address to the nation after he's sworn in as the 46th president.
Well, these are the two cradles that have created Joe Biden, the state of Delaware and here the U.S. Capitol. You know, this is a place that helped him recover in his life, and now he is thinking about recovery today. You know, when you talk to the people around him, they say we have two things before us, a rescue and a recovery. And what you're going to hear today is the rescue is not just about getting us out of the COVID epidemic, it's also a moral rescue. It's about trying to get this country back into a condition in which we can begin to even conceive of making hard choices together. And then there is the recovery process. And that means also building back better, as he says. And, you know, that can sound like a slogan, except that there's a meaning to it. What he means is Donald Trump happened for a reason. He didn't come out of nowhere. He was the product of some deep-seated facts in American life, some real struggles. And if we're going to try to repair our politics, we have to address these kinds of long-running structural issues, systemic racism, income inequality. You may not hear those by name, but what you're going to hear today is the idea that we're embarking on something that is bigger even than the present crisis.
But do you think we'll see an emotional, almost teary-eyed Biden today as we saw yesterday, Evan?
Well, he is somebody who is comfortable with tears. You know, I've been with him at times in the Oval Office, in the West Wing when there were tears of joy too. I mean, moments of positivity. He does not shield that from us. Look, this is a moment for him that is all of these overlapping elements of enormous emotional charge. There's family with him. There's family who cannot be here. There is, after all, the country at stake and the office that he has been pursuing since he was a teenager. So we may well see a very emotional Joe Biden. But look, he also takes this moment and the majesty of it very seriously because he knows the world is watching. It's not just Delaware. It's not just the United States. This is the moment when he can, and he will probably never have a larger audience than he does today at this moment, in this 20 minutes, for him to begin to tell people across the world that the United States is here, the Republic still stands, and that he is prepared to begin this process.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Jamie Gangel, you're getting some new information as well on what we can anticipate in the next president's address after he's sworn in.
Well, Wolf, we've heard that it is like the speech when Joe Biden declared victory, hopeful, turning a page. My source says there is no plan to mention Donald Trump by name in the speech, which presidents normally do. But after all, Donald Trump isn't going to be there. I'm also told the speech will have a realistic but optimistic tone, that it will be conciliatory without being a pushover, Wolf. And I just want to mention one other thing. I was just told that former Vice President Dick Cheney and his wife were invited today, and they very much wanted to come. But as is the case with a lot of people, they were advised by their doctor because of the COVID pandemic not to come. That said, I was told that they were very proud of their daughter Liz Cheney's vote to impeach Donald Trump, that they thought it showed courage and conscience. Wolf?
Yeah, it looks like the motorcade is beginning to get closer and closer to the U.S. Capitol. Caitlin, well, hold on, Caitlin, for a moment. John King, let's talk a little bit about what we're bracing for right now. This is history, obviously, unfolding, but it's unique in the sense that we are seeing Republican leaders. Mitch McConnell, we just saw Ted Cruz, we saw other Republicans who are there as well. And we saw Bernie Sanders, Democrats, show up as well. So this is an effort to show some semblance of a normal inauguration.
Well, the country is watching, a divided country is watching, 2 weeks after the insurrection at the Capitol. The world is watching today, though. Wolf, this is supposed to be a big American moment. Yes, we're inaugurating a Democratic president today. 4 years ago, we inaugurated a Republican president. And that is important. But the bigger message of the day is supposed to be that this is an American moment. We have continuity of government. We have a peaceful transfer of power. We have respect. Respect for the process, respect for each other, respect for institutions. Respect is not a word that was used very often over the past 4 years. I think it will be used a lot beginning today. Because whatever your politics watching at home or around the world, Joe Biden respects government. He respects people who disagree with him. He listens to them. He does not chainsaw them on Twitter. He respects that building where he will take the oath. For 37 years as a United States Senator, that was his home. That was his office. Again, he's about to walk into it as the president-elect and to leave it as the president of the United States. What a testament to his personal resilience. And whether you agree or disagree with his politics, twice Toulouse runs for the president. All the personal tragedy in his life, and today he will take the oath of office as the President of the United States. A man who, every time he's been knocked down, has gotten up and gotten back into the fight. You have to respect that, to come back to that word. It's a majestic day. It always has been, and it always should be. And just because of, in the middle of a pandemic, 2 weeks after the government was attacked at the inspiration of the sitting president of the United States, it's all the more so. And back to Jamie Gangel's point, President Bush is happy today to be there as a Republican. Even Mitch McConnell, who was with President Trump for most of the last 4 years, in recent days has made it pretty clear he wants to shove President Trump to the sidelines if he can, to be part of the Republicans trying to do that. And so there's a cleansing. There's an air of cleansing about today. There's an internal fight in the Republican Party about President Trump, soon to be former President Trump, that's going to continue. But today is an American celebration, and again, a testament to voting, a testament to the system, and a testament to the resilience and stubbornness. Irish stubborn is Joe Biden.
There you see the Biden motorcade driving closer and closer to the Capitol, driving right by all the U.S. National Guard troops who have emerged on Washington, D.C., some 25,000, many of them armed to help protect this city during this very, very significant moment. Manu Raju, you're there. You're getting ready to see the president-elect and his entourage arrive.
Yeah, and we're actually going to see them being greeted by congressional leaders of both parties, a sign of bipartisanship on this historic day. Just inside the east front steps of the Capitol, inside the doors, are the congressional leaders. Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, they will be there. We do probably expect the other Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, as well as the House Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, to greet Joe Biden on his entrance to the Capitol. He's going to walk up the steps, the east front steps of the Capitol, into the House side of the building, and then make his way through the Capitol and ultimately come out the west side of the Capitol, where he will deliver his inaugural address. And it's just such a stunning contrast from what we saw just 2 weeks ago, when these rioters came all over this plaza and stormed the very east front steps of the Capitol, that the soon-to-be president will be walking up and delivering his historic remarks. But right now we're seeing this motorcade pull up. We do expect him to walk out momentarily, and we do expect the congressional leaders to greet him as he walks in to deliver his remarks.
We have this sense, Manu, how many of the 100 senators might be there today? How many of the 435 members of the House of Representatives? Are almost all of them there, or is it just a significant number?
I think there will be a significant number. There will be some who are not showing up. We're seeing, some members decide that they will not come for a variety of reasons. It looks like we are seeing Kamala Harris and her husband walk out of her motorcade. From our vantage point, it looks like she is waiting now. There is Joe Biden walking out right now, and there's the president-elect, Joe Biden.
He is right there, and he's going to be walking in, and Dr. Joe Biden, his wife is there, of course, as well, members of the family. They are all there for this truly historic moment as we're watching all of this unfold. The vice president-elect, her husband, Doug Emhoff, they are there already as well. As you can see, this is one of these historic moments as we get ready and ready.
Remarkable scene.
Let's listen and see if we catch anything. Republican and Senator Amy Klobuchar, they are there representing the U.S. Senate to greet the president-elect and the future First Lady of the United States. Let's listen and watch as this a very, very significant moment continues. You know, John, as we're watching this unfold, let's just give a sense of perspective. 2 weeks ago today, on January 6th, we saw what was there's the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. She's there, obviously, as well. We saw a riot emerge, an angry pro-Trump mob storming this building where we are right now. And then a week later, we saw the second impeachment of President Trump. And now the inauguration of this new president of the United States. Within 2 weeks, look at the drama that has unfolded.
And as we look at the drama, we have to remember the world is watching the drama unfold here, and it is majestic drama today. It is the inauguration of a new president. You see the flags, you see the ceremony, you see the pomp and the circumstance that you should have for the inauguration of a new president. And again, the world watching, the country watching, all the more important because of the events you just mentioned. One Wednesday ago, Donald Trump forever stained, impeached for a second time. 2 Wednesdays ago, Trump stained, I would argue, even more so by first leading a rally and then urging his supporters to march on Capitol Hill, and then dozens, if not more, of those supporters breaking into that building in a criminal act, attacking their own government. So this is a message today, not only of a transition of power, of a new administration, but of the strength and resilience of the system, of the democracy. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will walk into this building again where both of them have worked as senators. They walk in as president-elect and vice president-elect. You see the lectern set up there for the ceremony. Scaled back some before some COVID, but still spectacular sight as we prepare. We're getting very close now. 90 minutes from now, Joe Biden will be the president of these United States.
The House leadership is going to be introduced momentarily, then the Senate leadership, then the VIPs will be introduced, including the former Vice President Dan Quayle, the former President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, the former President George W. Bush and Laura Bush, former President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. Anderson, it's all explicitly timed out as we get ready for around noon, when Joe Biden will become the 46th president of the United States.
Yeah, and again, such a stark contrast to just 2 weeks ago, what we saw happening at the Capitol on those very steps that the Bidens walked up. David Axelrod, you have been there at the inauguration of President Obama. What's happening behind the closed doors?
Well, a lot of excitement. I must say that the rituals of this are familiar, but they've never been more important than now. And one of my recollections, people are milling around in the Speaker's office, dignitaries and so on. I was waiting for President Obama there to give him something before he went out to be sworn in, and President Bush arrived first. He was just leaving office, and we had not been terribly kind to him in the campaign. He knew that, and he could not have been more encouraging to me personally, and I remember him putting his arm on his shoulder and said, just remember this, you're going to do great, but appreciate every minute, because it's going to go by faster than you'll ever think, and it's going to be the ride of your life. There's nothing better. And I thought, what a gracious note. And I'm so happy to see him here, because his appearance here is symbolically so important for our country, to understand that we are first Americans, and that when we transfer power from one administration to another, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, we have a vested interest in your success. That hopefully will be part of the spirit with which people will receive Biden's address today.
I can't tell you how wonderful it was to see those couples walking up those steps. Just a few moments ago, 2 weeks ago today, it was an occupied place. It was a crime scene. And now we have democracy rising. And another thing I think about, Anderson, is that to Biden, the Capitol is his second home. And when he walks through these halls, unlike Barack Obama, he knows where he's going. And it must be an odd feeling for him right now to say, well, I'm leaving the Capitol now to go to the White House.
There's obviously Scalise and Clyburn. Evan, there is also something just about the sort of mundane milling around that's kind of comforting and soothing. It's something we see every 4 years, but given all the tumult and agita that this country has been through, it is a new beginning.
It is, and for Joe Biden, that space, that Capitol building, has been about the milling around. One of the things he did was he kept his locker in the Senate gym, even after he went over to the vice presidency, because he liked to come back and be among senators, be among members of the House. And one of the things that he said to me at one point was he'd watched the culture of the Congress degrade over time. He remembered when Bill Clinton, then president, had been called Bubba for the first time by somebody in the Congress, and he said there's been a cultural change in it, and it's not going to go anywhere good. And this was years ago that he sort of picked up on this. I also think it's important that he used to sit sometimes on the floor of the Senate on the other side of the aisle. He'd sit with his friend John McCain. And it bothered him, actually, that the leadership of both parties had said, we don't think that's a good idea. It doesn't look good. And so he'd they'd had to go back to their respective sides of the aisle. That's not how he sees this place.
First of all, we had a near-death experience for our democracy. You're talking about watching the people go back up the stairs, and what Gloria was saying is so powerful. It was a crime scene. And now it's not. And I think that Joe Biden is going to train us to see the world differently. We got trained to look for threats under Trump and to look for things to block and to be scared of. He's going to teach us how to look for opportunities, for common ground, for ways to come together. And it's happening right now. And these are members of Congress. It's happening right now. Here we have people from different parties coming together, sit down, restoring these rituals, and it does matter. And for me, I was one of the people, out in the crowd with Obama when Obama came. You guys were up there. I was out in the crowd. We were cold.
You look good, by the way.
Oh, yeah. A little tiny dot. I had my aunt with me. We were shivering, and Obama came out. And like I said, that feeling of hope was palpable. I think the hope is different now. It's more about faith. Our faith has been tested, and our faith endures. And I think I think you're going to see a different country come out of this.
Well, you were among 2 million people who were out there. When I was sitting on that platform, I was looking out at a sea of humanity. There will be no one there, and that will be symbolic of the challenge that we face. But when I watch soon-to-be President Biden come up those steps, it struck me that he walked those steps for the first time in 1973 as a young senator. His colleagues included people who served with Calvin Coolidge and Franklin Roosevelt. And now, 48 years later, he's walking up those steps. And he is a link to the past and a beacon to a better future. And it's really an interesting position. Who would have predicted that at this stage in his life he would be in that position?
Jake Tapper, as President-elect Biden, soon to be President Biden, looks out, he won't see that sea of people that President Obama and President Trump saw. He'll see a sea of flags, 200,000 flags representing people who are not there. Also the reminder of the 400,000 dead in this country, and that number still on the rise, Jake.
Anderson, it is a day of solemnity because of all that loss, and also because of the terrorist threat that has required this intense security here at the Capitol. It's amazing. You look back at images of this exact spot in the Capitol 2 weeks ago, and it was the scene of an insurrection and a terrorist attack. But here it is, a day of majesty and celebration of transition of power, if not peaceful transition of power.
It sounds like they're announcing the leadership of the Senate.
The Honorable Dick Durbin and Mrs. Rima Doden. Majority Whip, the Honorable John Thune and Mrs. Kimberly Thune. Democratic Leader, the Honorable Charles Schori of the Senate, the Honorable Chuck Grassley, and Mrs. Jennifer Hines.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be cold.
Patrick Leahy, another constitutional role in the succession line.
Yeah, and it's a really important moment for the United States and also for the world. The world saw American democracy be truly tested over the last 2 months. And, it looked wobbly there a few times, especially 2 weeks ago in this exact same spot. But the world is now watching as American democracy continues.
And former Vice President
There's former Vice President Dan Quayle.
But it's for that moment, for that same reason that I think this is a moment of celebration for this country. I mean, inaugurations, we don't have the crowds today, but inaugurations are a big day for this country. All of this pomp and circumstance that you're seeing, the flags, the ceremony, these are traditions that go back pretty far in this country. And for most Americans, they only get to see it every 4 years, and they're seeing it again today, even in spite of what we've witnessed and experienced as a country in the last couple of weeks. This is the process that we are experiencing as a nation once again.
Dan Quayle, of course, held the job that vice president, which Joe Biden held.
Former Indiana senator.
That's right. Joe Biden will be the 15th vice president to be sworn in as president.
Let's go with Jeff Zeleny, who's down there, who has some news that is interesting in light of one of the heroes from 2 weeks ago. Jeff?
Jake, we have been talking all morning long about how this is the exact site of the riot at the Capitol, but one other moment from inside that insurrection that we can all remember so clearly is Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman. He held rioters at bay for some 85 seconds to get senators out of harm's way, to get the vice president out of harm's way. We've all seen that viral video. Well, today we are learning that he is going to be escorting Vice President-elect Kamala Harris into the inauguration ceremony. He is going to be walking side by side with her. He's also going to be coming with a new title. He's going to be the acting deputy House Sergeant at Arms. So certainly a monumental move for just the last 2 weeks. He's 40 years old, an Iraq War veteran and native of Washington, D.C., who will be walking side by side with a historic person in her own right, Senator Kamala Harris, becoming the next Vice President of the United States, with Officer Eugene Goodman next to her.
Okay, so Jeff, we can't really hear you very well, so let me just tell the viewers what you're reporting, which is that Vice President-elect Kamala Harris is being escorted to the inauguration ceremony by Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman, who you might recall from his heroism 2 weeks ago. He led a group of the insurrectionists away from the Senate. He kind of served as a decoy and led them away from where they wanted to go, which was the floor of the U.S. Senate. Now, some other rioters, terrorists, did find their way to the Senate, but in that initial assault, he guided them away. Since then, Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman, who is a veteran as well, has a new role. He is the acting deputy sergeant at arms in the House of Representatives.
The Honorable Dan Quayle.
Wolf?
Dan Quayle just introduced. Here he is. He's walking in. The first of several major VIPs arriving right now. There's Dan Quayle, the former Vice President of the United States, showing up, John. And he's going to be followed by former President Bill Clinton, former President George W. Bush, former President Barack Obama. An enormous display of goodwill from these former presidents of the United States.
An enormous display and a very important display. Again, 2 weeks ago, there were thugs, rioters, running through that building, attacking the American democracy. Today, we're watching the former vice president here. We'll see then former presidents come out right behind him, showing America and showing the world that building that was the site, it was a crime scene 2 weeks ago today. It is a stage today for a very important moment in the American democracy. Dan Quayle, I should note, a reminder, we lost President George H.W. Bush, but also that was the last presidency, a one-term presidency. George H.W. Bush served one term. After that, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama both elected to 2 terms. Donald Trump, of course, leaving Washington today after 1 term as president. It is a remarkable show of force, a bipartisan show of power here, an American tradition. But as Jake was just talking about, an American tradition that was a question mark 2 weeks ago when that building was being attacked, and many were questioning what was happening. Why would an American president send his supporters to attack a shrine of American democracy? But today we can turn the page on that, Wolf.
After the former presidents are introduced, the Chief Justice, other members of other justices of the U.S. Supreme Court will be introduced. And then significantly, John, the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, and Karen Pence, they will be introduced as well. Missing in action, one Donald Trump.
He has never respected the traditions and norms, the things, forgive me, that make America great, that truly make America great. These are the things that make America great. When everybody decides for a few hours, for a day, we can set aside partisan differences. We will get about those debates. Joe Biden wants to change just about every policy compass point of the Trump administration. Those debates will begin perhaps even before the sun sets. But this is what is supposed to happen. We watch the flags, we listen to the band, we watch the leaders of our past parade onto the stage to be part of the ceremony to pass the baton and the torch. You see former President Clinton,
Bill Clinton
former
and Hillary
Secretary
Clinton. They're walking in. They're going to be introduced momentarily. Jamie Gangel is with us as well. You got some information on these former presidents who are going to be attending and celebrating this moment in American history.
I have to tell you, Wolf, when the inauguration was being planned, I was asked to reach out to both former President Clinton and former President Bush to find out whether they would be attending. And I got the same response from both of them, sitting here waiting for my invitation. They were really excited to come and to be here. And I think it should also be noted that former President George Bush was one of the first people to make a statement congratulating Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And he didn't just make a statement, he picked up the phone and called them. Wolf?
Yep, there they are, the former President Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, who was defeated 4 years ago by Donald Trump. She's here as well at the U.S. Capitol. They are about to be formally introduced, and they'll be followed by former President George W. Bush.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 42nd President of the United States, the Honorable William J. Clinton and the Honorable Hillary Rodham Clinton.
And there's former President George W. Bush and Laura Bush. They're getting ready to walk in as well. This is an exciting moment for those of us, John, who love American history, who love covering presidents of the United States, Democrats and Republicans. They're getting together at this really historic moment.
And think of the remarkable moment. A, the message this sends to the country and to the world, to have the former presidents there of both parties. George W. Bush has watched Donald Trump run against him in some ways, run against the old Republican Party. So this is a moment where, trust me, he's quite happy that Donald Trump is gone, even though Donald Trump was a Republican. And imagine the moment for Hillary Clinton. And imagine all the scorn Republicans heap on Hillary Clinton. She had the dignity and respect to come and attend this event 4 years ago, even after the campaign against Donald Trump. She's here again today in a much better mood.
Another introduction.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 43rd President of the United States, the Honorable George W. Bush and Mrs. Laura Bush.
Former President George W. Bush and Laura Bush. Jamie Gangel, you're getting some reporting. What else are you learning?
Well, I have to say I'm laughing as I'm watching them come come down, Wolf, because you may recall that even though he's a Republican, former President Bush did not vote for Donald Trump in 2016. He left it blank. I think it's pretty fair to guess he did not vote for him in 2020 either. But it's what a difference 4 years make when at the last inauguration, President Bush was famously quoted after hearing Donald Trump's inauguration speech, the carnage speech, as saying, "That was some weird SH, you can fill in the rest." This is a small club, these former presidents. They are very, very close. They talk to each other. They organize. Donald Trump is not going to be a part of this group.
And there you see the Supreme Court justices led by the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, walking in as well. They will be introduced after former President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama are introduced. So they've got a real specific agenda. Listen to this.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 44th President of the United States, the Honorable Barack H. Obama and Mrs. Michelle Obama.
There they are. This is a moment. This is a huge moment for Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, for that matter, don't you think?
Absolutely. 4 years ago, Donald Trump ran against Barack Obama and won the presidency. In some ways, Donald Trump's election was a repudiation of the Obama agenda. However, now you have Joe Biden coming in, and Joe Biden ran saying we're going to strengthen Obamacare. We're going to bring back the multilateral approach. We're going to respect our allies. Now, he will be different. Joe Biden will be. President Biden will be in different ways than President Obama, but this is a very proud moment for the Obamas, both of them.
Let's get David Axelrod's thought. You used to work for Barack Obama when he was president of the United States, and David, you helped him become the president of the United States.
Yeah, and I also watched the relationship between him and Joe Biden grow. You know, they weren't that close when Obama named him vice president, and over those 8 years of the presidency, they just became closer and closer. Sometimes these relationships grow apart. They became very, very good friends. So I'm sure Obama, for him, this moment is not just about his happiness for the country, which I'm sure he feels, but also for a very close friend who is realizing a live stream, and in whom I know he has great faith to be the right person at this moment. So this is a moment of great satisfaction for both Barack and Michelle Obama.
There you see the justices of the U.S. Supreme Court, including some of the justices appointed, nominated by soon-to-be former President Donald Trump. The Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, walking in right there as well. They're going to be followed, John. It's all three branches of the United States government participating in this moment.
Right, and when conservatives talk about the Trump legacy, they will not want to talk about impeach twice. They will not want to talk about inspiring insurrection. They will try to talk about Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Coney Barrett. One of the big legacies of the Trump administration that will be with us for the next 25 years or more is the appointment of those three justices and dozens of other federal court judges.
This is the family of the soon-to-be Vice President of the United States, and Doug Emhoff, her husband. These are the stepchildren of Kamala Harris walking in as well. All the family members are going to be introduced in the course of this inauguration. This is Cole and Ella, who are there, right there, obviously very excited, John.
For the family, it's just simply a remarkable moment, and it is a reminder that we're being introduced to a historic vice president, a woman as the vice president of the United States, a woman of color as vice president of the United States, the first, second man, second dude, call it what you will, the husband of the vice president and the family of the vice president in this remarkably now very public role. Yes, she was the Attorney General of California, then the Senator from California, but there is nothing like national office in the spotlight of the vice presidency. It would be fascinating to watch different families handle that in different ways. It would be fascinating to watch as it plays out.
Next, to be introduced will be the family of the president-elect, Joe Biden and Jill Biden. They will be introduced, and then they will be followed by the Vice President, Mike Pence, and Karen Pence. There you see the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who's there, former presidents. It's a pretty, John, it's a real VIP crowd, shall we say?
The way it is supposed to be, a bipartisan crowd. You see, I believe that was President Clinton and President Bush saying hello there. This is the Biden family.
This is Ashley and Hunter Biden. These are the children of the Bidens who are walking in right now, and the grandchildren, I should say, as well. They've got a large family, and they're walking in as we watch all of this unfold. Jake.
Thanks, Walt. This is a celebration of the United States of America in so many ways. Here we see the president-elect's children, Hunter and Ashley, as well as grandchildren, coming into the procession, coming into the proceedings. But as we look out in this crowd and we see President George W. Bush and President Barack Obama, President Bill Clinton, former Vice President Dan Quayle, and all of this, not all, but so many Democrats and Republicans in the House and Senate were reminded that American democracy was able to survive, does persist. It was tested, certainly, for months there, if not for years. Dana?
That's right. And, as we see Joe Biden's two surviving children, Ashley and Hunter, we also see his grandchildren who really have been very active, were very active in his campaign, particularly his granddaughters who were active on social media. They tried to help to reach out to young voters in lots of ways. But they're also people who, according to Joe Biden, really helped convince him to run. I mean, the way that he tells the story, he obviously felt that he was done. And it was, of course, after Charlottesville and after the both sidesism that Donald Trump did, that his granddaughters said, you got to do this. You got to do this. This is your time, Pop. This is your time.
And as they're being introduced formally and coming down those stairs formally, just a moment to recognize all the modern families being represented by both the first and the second family. Ashley Biden is the daughter of Joe and Jill Biden, but Hunter Biden is his surviving child from his first marriage Joe Biden's first wife, who died tragically in a car crash. And earlier you saw Ella and Cole Emhoff, who are the stepdaughters of Kamala Harris, and are Doug Emhoff's children. So, like so many American families, you see how blended families are coming together today from both the first and the second families. And now we see Vice President Mike Pence and Karen Pence walking through the Senate, through the Capitol chambers. Vice President Mike Pence choosing to attend this inauguration, which, given all that's happened, is a pretty significant moment.
It is, especially because he was not at the send-off at Joint Base Andrews for President Trump. They claimed logistical difficulties in attending both, and obviously he decided this was more important. Pamela Brown has more for us right now on the presence of outgoing Vice President and outgoing Second Lady Pence. Pamela?
Well, we just learned from a source close to Pence, Jake, that Vice President Pence did leave a handwritten note to the incoming Vice President, Kamala Harris. He did leave a note. A source would not say what the contents of the note was, but it is notable for a couple of reasons. One is it's not necessarily tradition for the Vice President to leave a note like this for the incoming Vice President, but Pence has clearly taken many steps to smooth things over during this transition. He called Harris a few days ago to congratulate her. As we know, the president has not reached out at all. And so he's taken many steps to try to smooth things over, and he's become an unlikely defender, essentially, of Biden and Harris's victory by resisting the president's pressure to overturn the election results, something he didn't have the authority to do. Now, I'm told by a source today, one thing that Pence wants to accomplish is to meet Eugene Goodman, and thank him in person. He is the heroic Capitol Hill officer who has been promoted to Deputy Sergeant of Arms. Unclear if they have made contact yet.
All right, Pamela. We should note that Pence's desire to smooth things over is only about 2 weeks old during this 2-month transition. Before that, he was as much a hindrance as anybody else. But let's look forward at this inaugural right now. Pretty soon, within the hour, we're expecting President-elect Joe Biden, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., to be sworn in as the 46th President of the United States. Let's listen in.
Honorable Julie E. Adams and Chief Administrative Officer of the House of Representatives, Catherine Spindor.
These are some of the individuals who help run the Congress. We are expecting also some of the individuals who are the chairs of the inaugural committee. You saw earlier, perhaps, Senator Roy Blunt and Senator Amy Klobuchar. They are the chair and ranking member of the Senate Rules Committee, which is in charge of this. But these are basically dignitaries who are key to the events going on today and also in the Congress in general.
It takes a lot to put on an inauguration, and there are lots of protocols, lots of rules, and they are involved in doing that, and not just the elected representatives, but the people who work there and have done this many times. We just saw, just for a second, a flash of the Clintons. I love watching these moments as an American, as a journalist, as somebody who likes history, to see them all mingling. Let's listen to what's next.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Michael R. Pence and Mrs. Karen Pence.
Bipartisan applause there for the outgoing Vice President, Mike Pence, and his wife, the Second Lady. Obviously some appreciation that they are abiding by norms and basic protocols and basic decency by attending and being part of this transfer of power. There you see former President George W. Bush, who knows Mike Pence from when Mike Pence was in the House of Representatives before he went back to Indiana to run for governor.
That's right. He was a member of the leadership. But just looking at Mike Pence there you see him greeting the Obamas as well. Looking at him 2 weeks ago today, he was in there doing his constitutional duty, and a mob, inspired by the man who picked him for vice president, was trying to break in, was right where he is, to get into the Capitol. Some of them were screaming, "Hang Mike Pence."
And there was literally a gallows that one of them or some of them had fashioned outside the Capitol with a noose.
Exactly. And talk about what you said earlier, Jake, a celebration of democracy, the fact that here we are 2 weeks later to the day, and there he is doing his duty, not constitutionally this time, but as an American, as somebody who respects protocol. He is there, as opposed to being at the Andrews Air Force Base send-off this morning.
And for what it's worth, I mean, given his role in the last several months, he has played a role in where we are in terms of what happened 2 weeks ago. But for what it's worth, it's important that he decided to make a statement about the transfer of power here and about being a part of this process and being a part of this ceremony, which has become sacred in this country, at least in the last century, where we've had this kind of marking of the passing of the baton from one administration to the next. And what's always fun and nice to see in moments like this is you see the former presidents and even members of Congress that they've known throughout their political lives greeting each other and seeing each other, in some cases for the first time in a long time. I mean, these are not people who see each other all the time. They're elbow bumping. Maybe they're from different political parties, but that's part of the experience here. Even in socially distanced COVID times, you see there's Steve Scalise, and you see, I think that is, Donna Brazile in the background there, but there's people who rarely see each other coming together today and actually enjoying this moment of brief bipartisanship before things start again in Washington tomorrow.
Yeah, not to be too cold about it, but often these former presidents only see each other at inaugurations and at funerals.
Yeah.
The pictures I have in my mind of George W. Bush and the Obamas, really he hangs out more with Michelle than he does with Barack, are from the John McCain funeral and then from the George H.W. Bush funeral. But that is reassuring for Americans to see that individuals who battled fiercely in an election or oppose each other in terms of policies can come together to celebrate the country together, to be human with one another because of their commitment to the United States and the ideals that this nation aspires to.
And they can even become friends. You know, George W. Bush and Michelle Obama have actually developed a friendship. And as David Axelrod said earlier, when Barack Obama was running for president, he was not particularly kind to his predecessor. He was basically running against the Bush legacy, but there was kindness in the turnover between administrations. And when Barack Obama turned the White House over to Donald Trump.
A-Rod?
It's A-Rod.
That's A-Rod.
It's A-Rod. J-Lo is going to be performing a little bit later. So
by the way, Alex Rodriguez and Jennifer Lopez. It's like they're our best friends, but go ahead.
But, you know, when Barack Obama turned the White House over to Donald Trump, you know, he said in his letter that he wanted to be as helpful to the Trumps as possible. And I believe he meant it. And I think Donald Trump believed he meant it because he cherished that letter in a lot of ways. They never took him up on that offer. But that is the tradition that we are supposed to be celebrating today. It's the tradition that is represented by what we're seeing on the screen here right now.
You see Barack Obama being friendly, saying hi to a bunch of people.
I'm wondering if he's going to walk over to Mike Pence, because we were noticing that Mike Pence was kind of
they were sort of nodding to each
standing
other.
alone. You know, we'll see what happens. But there he is in the background. Maybe not. But isn't that an interesting dynamic? There's a lot of kind of chumminess, and the current vice president and the current second lady are quietly standing in the background. They're there, they're doing what needs to be done, but there doesn't seem to be the same camaraderie.
Well, look, I don't want to look backward too much, but I mean, 2 days before the terrorist attack on the Capitol, Mike Pence was down in Georgia, Vice President Pence was down in Georgia, continuing the big lie, talking about the election and suggesting there was fraud when there was not. So he was part of the problem, even if he got religion since. Here is the Vice President-elect, Kamala Harris, and her husband, the soon-to-be second gentleman, Doug Emhoff.
As they walk down the stairs here, this is a major, major moment for this country. And it's a major moment in American history. The first African American and South Asian and woman to ever hold this position. The first second gentleman ever, Doug Emhoff. These two will be both making history in their own ways. And in many ways, Kamala Harris has been very cognizant of nodding to that in a lot of symbolism that we'll see here later today in what she's wearing the two black designers today, but also taking the oath of office from Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who is the first Latina Supreme Court justice, but like her, was a prosecutor earlier in her career and is someone who Kamala Harris has said inspired her trajectory as she rose in the ranks of American politics.
Yeah, there was, we just saw Pete Buttigieg, the former South Bend, Indiana mayor. Look, there is former President Clinton saying hello to the vice president,
Maria Miller-Lohmeyer, the acting Deputy House Sergeant-at-Arms, Kevin Grubbs, and the acting Deputy Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, United States Capitol Police Officer, Private First Class Eugene O. Goodman.
Eugene O. Goodman is getting a hero's welcome. He is the Capitol Police officer who helped bait the wild mob away from the Senate. That's him right there. A veteran. He is an American hero and has been rewarded with a promotion and the nation's gratitude. He will be escorting Vice President-elect Kamala Harris as a recognition of his valor and his heroism.
The next time those doors open will be real history.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President-elect of the United States, Kamala Debbie Harris, and Mr. Douglas Emhoff.
This is a major moment for American history, for world history, for the country, as Kamala Harris walks down the stairs, soon to become the next Vice President of the United States. And I want to make a note about the color she's wearing, not to be, trite about it, but Kamala Harris is wearing purple, which is something that's pretty significant to her. When she ran for president, one of her colors of her campaign was purple and yellow. That is a nod to Shirley Chisholm, who ran for president as a black woman decades ago and has inspired her political career.
72.
And 72.
1972.
And so you see Kamala Harris nodding to this major moment in American history for so many people, for so many women, people of color, for her sorority sisters in Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated. And she's standing there right next to Mike Pence, current Vice President of the United States. The two have spoken on the phone in just the last few days. But other than that, have had not a whole lot of contact since she became Vice President-elect.
Just look at you can't see her entire face because of the COVID crisis. There she is saying hi to Jim Clyburn. He is the House Majority Whip, the Dean of the South Carolina Congressional Delegation. This is a historical moment.
He's wearing his
highest
South Carolina
ranking
State University hat, his alma mater.
The highest ranking black member of Congress in history. Chatting. He just lost his wife not long ago. Chatting with Kamala Harris, this historical figure, the first black woman to ever be a vice president of the United States.
And not just that, Jim Clyburn is the reason those two people are there today. He helped boost Joe Biden. But look at Kamala Harris's face. You can see she's obviously greeting people. You can see that the vice president-elect is trying to take it in. You saw earlier, and she's doing it now, she kind of looked up. And you almost could see her thinking to herself, I need to remember this. I need to take this moment in. She'll see the pictures and so forth afterwards, but I can't even imagine what an out-of-body experience it is for her. It's a moment on her face.
It's a moment of history that she's making yet again as someone who has done this in a lot of her positions, being the first black woman, the first South Asian woman to hold several of the positions that she's had in her life. Back when she was a prosecutor in California, she was one of just a handful of black United States senators, and now she will be the first black woman, South Asian woman in the to be vice president of the United States. States.
As the ceremony continues, let's go to Wolf Blitzer right now.
All right, there you go. We can see the President-elect of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden. They're going to be walking in as well, and then they will be introduced. But this is the first time we're actually seeing them inside the Congress. They're introducing the congressional leadership right now, John, the Democrats and Republicans. And I just want to alert our viewers that we're also going to be having some excellent, truly excellent musical presentations. Lady Gaga will sing the national anthem. Jennifer Lopez will do some special musical selections, and Garth Brooks will as well. But in the meantime, let's get ready for the President-elect of the United States.
And the Honorable Elaine L. Chao and Staff Representative
An American celebration, Wolf, with the world watching. Soon to be President of the United States, Joe Biden, walking out with his wife, Jill Biden. The pictures tell us about history. The pictures tell us about the resilience. 2 weeks ago, we were watching thugs run through these halls. Now we're watching the military honor guard there as the former vice president, former senator, soon to be president of the United States, walks through with the first lady, soon to be first lady, Jill Biden. Just remarkable history. The election of Joe Biden, now the inauguration of Joe Biden. What a moment. The weight on this new president in the middle of a pandemic, with an economy bleeding jobs, a country so divided that supporters of the former president, soon to be former president, attacked that building 2 weeks ago today. Just a remarkable moment, the weight of the presidency about to pass onto Joe Biden.
Evan Osnos is with us, the Biden biographer. This must be so moving, so exceptional for this man, Evan.
Well, it's extraordinary. Here he is, 48 years after he entered this. He's now going to be the oldest president of the United States, facing enormous challenges. And I'm reminded of what he said in 2008 at the Democratic National Convention. He said, failure at some point in life is inevitable, but giving up is unforgivable. And that has indeed been the text of his life, and it has led him right here to the doorstep of history.
The inaugural ceremony is about to get underway. We're about to hear the horns. We're about to hear the president-elect and the future First Lady of the United States introduced, and this ceremony will begin. There you see the congressional leadership. It's about to begin right now. This is one of those moments that a lot of us will remember down the road. It's getting chilly out there a little bit as well, and it's I can actually see a few snow flurries coming in as well, so I'm sure they're all anxious to get this underway as the weather. Let's listen in right now as they're introducing more leaders in the Congress.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. and Dr. Jill Biden. Please welcome the Honorable Amy Klobuchar.
Vice President Pence, Mr. President-elect, and the judicial branch, former presidents and first ladies, vice presidents, leaders from abroad, and a whole bunch of Bidens. America, welcome to the 59th presidential inauguration, where in just a few moments, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take their solemn oaths. This ceremony is the culmination of 244 years of a democracy. It is the moment when leaders brought to this stage by the will of the people promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish it and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, guardians of our country. Have we become too jaded, too accustomed to the ritual of the passing of the torch of democracy to truly appreciate what a blessing and a privilege it is to witness this moment? I think not. 2 weeks ago, when an angry, violent mob staged an insurrection and desecrated this temple of our democracy, it awakened us to our responsibilities as Americans. This is the day when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and does what America always does: goes forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This conveyance of a sacred trust between our leaders and our people takes place in front of this shining Capitol dome for a reason. When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of this Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going on, it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave their lives to preserve our republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us, not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Joe Biden, who vows to restore of America and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, who stands on the shoulders of so many on this platform who have forged the way to this day. When she takes the oath of office, little girls and boys across the world will know that anything and everything is possible. And in the end, that is America, our democracy, a country of so much good. And today, on these Capitol steps and before this glorious field of flags, we rededicate ourselves to its cause. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce to you the senator who has...
A moment ago, but thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thanks to the other members of the Joint Congressional Committee on the inauguration as we officially begin the 59th inaugural ceremony. I also want to thank the Joint Committee staff and our partners, particularly our security partners, for the way they've dealt with unprecedented circumstances. When I chaired the inauguration 4 years ago, I shared President Reagan's 1981 description of this event as commonplace and miraculous. Commonplace because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Miraculous because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Americans have celebrated this moment during war, during depression, and now during pandemic. Once again, all three branches of our government come together as the Constitution envisions. Once again, we renew our commitment to our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union. That theme for this inauguration, our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union, was announced by the Joint Committee before the election with the belief that the United States can only fulfill its promise and set an example for others if we are always working to be better than we have been. The Constitution established that determined democracy with its first three words, declaring the people as the source of the government. The Articles of Confederation hadn't done that. The Magna Carta hadn't done that. Only the Constitution says the government exists because the people are the source of the reason it exists. They immediately followed those first three words with the words to form a more perfect union. The founders did not say to form a perfect union. They did not claim that in our new country nothing would need to be improved. Fortunately, they understood that always working to be better would be the hallmark of a great democracy. The freedoms we have today, the nation we have today, is not here just because it happened, and they aren't complete. A great democracy working through the successes and failures of our history, striving to be better than it had been. And we are more than we have been, and we are less than we hope to be. The assault on our Capitol at this very place just 2 weeks ago reminds us that a government designed to balance and check itself is both fragile and resilient. During the last year, the pandemic challenged our free and open society and called for extraordinary determination and sacrifice, and still challenges us today. Meeting that challenge head on have been and are healthcare workers, scientists, first responders, essential frontline workers, and so many others we depend on in so many ways. Today we come to this moment. People all over the world, as we're here, are watching and will watch what we do here. Our government comes together. The Congress and the courts join the transition of executive responsibility. One political party more pleased today and on every inaugural day than the other. But this is not a moment of division, it's a moment of unification. A new administration begins and brings with it a new beginning. And with that, our great national debate goes forward, and a determined democracy will continue to be essential in pursuit of a more perfect union and a better future for all Americans. What a privilege for me to join you today. Thank you. I'm pleased to call to the podium a longtime friend of the President-elect and his family, Father Leo O'Donovan, to lead us in an invocation. Please stand if you are able and remain standing for the national anthem and the pledge to our flag.
Thank you, Senator. I'll have to step for me. Thank you. Gracious and merciful God, at this sacred time we come before you in need, indeed on our knees. But we come still more with hope and with our eyes raised anew to the vision of a more perfect union in our land, a union of all our citizens to promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We are a people of many races, creeds, and colors, national backgrounds, cultures, and styles, now far more numerous and on land much vaster than when Archbishop John Carroll wrote his prayer for the inauguration of George Washington 232 years ago. Archbishop Carroll prayed that you, O Creator of all, would assist with your Holy Spirit of counsel and fortitude the President of these United States, that his administration may be conducted in righteousness and be eminently useful to your people. Today we confess our past failures to live according to our vision of equality, inclusion, and freedom for all. Yet we resolutely commit still more now to renewing the vision, to caring for one another in word and deed, especially the least fortunate among us, and so becoming a light for the world. There is a power in each and every one of us that lives by turning to every other one of us, a thrust of the Spirit to cherish and care and stand by others, and above all, those most in need. It is called love, and its path is to give ever more of itself. It is called American patriotism, born not of power and privilege, but of care for the common good, with malice toward none and with charity for all. For our new president, we beg of you the wisdom Solomon sought when he knelt before you and prayed for an understanding heart, so that I can govern your people and know the difference between right and wrong. We trust in the counsel of the letter of James. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Pope Francis has reminded us how important it is to dream together. By ourselves, he wrote, we risk seeing mirages, things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. Be with us, holy mystery of love, as we dream together. Help us under our new president to reconcile the people of our land, restore our dream and invest it with peace and justice and the joy that is the overflow of love. To the glory of your name, forever. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the presentation of our national colors by the Armed Forces Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem, and for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ladies and gentlemen, here for the singing of our national anthem, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, please welcome Lady Gaga. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from the City of South Fulton, Georgia Fire and Rescue Department, President of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 3920, Fire Captain Andrea M. Hall for the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What you are all about to be part of, America, is a historic moment of firsts. To administer the oath to our first African American, our first Asian American, and our first woman Vice President, Kamala Harris, it is my great privilege to welcome to the inaugural stage the first Latina to ever serve on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kamala Devi Harris, do solemnly swear.
I, Kamala Devi Harris, do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Please welcome Jennifer Lopez to perform This Land Is Your Land and America the Beautiful, accompanied by members of the President's Own United States Marine Band.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Oh, you and me, oh. for you and me.
Well, that was great. The sun is shining, and Mr. President-elect, this is the first inauguration in the history of America where J-Lo was the warm-up act for Chief Justice Roberts. With that, it is now my distinct honor to introduce the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, John Roberts, to administer the presidential oath to the next President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden, Jr., do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden, Jr., do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
Office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
My fellow Americans, a moment we have all been waiting for. It is now my great privilege and high honor to be the first person to officially introduce the 46th President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden, Jr.
Chief Justice Roberts, Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, and my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's day. This is democracy's day. A day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on the nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken, the oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we the people who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far. But we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once-in-a-century virus that silently stalks the country has taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself. A cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make health care secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge. And unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America when we've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh, all of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the great mall where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand, across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you've placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. And if you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand. Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand, There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. That's what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will get through this together. Together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again. Not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And in my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic. Those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them by becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind, and for our country. Amen. Folks, this is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up? All of us? It's time for boldness, for there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of century have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, then when our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best. They did their duty. They healed a broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, with the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And I'll give all of you, keep everything I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, and devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Garth Brooks to perform Amazing Grace.
Bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. If I can ask you to sing this last verse with me, not just the people here, but the people at home, at work, as one, united. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Hard not to be reminded of President Obama's singing that same song at the Mother Emanuel Church. A song that in our culture is as close to both poetry and prayer as you could possibly come. And we're going to finish with those two things. Let me introduce Amanda Gorman, our nation's first ever National Poet Laureate.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to Glade, the hill we climb if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it in its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Thank you, Amanda Gorman. Now for our benediction, I'm pleased to introduce Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, the pastor of the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Wilmington, Delaware, a friend of President Biden for 30 years.
As a nation and people of faith gathered in this historical moment, let us unite in prayer. God, we gather under the beauty of your holiness and the holiness of your beauty. We seek your face, your smile, your warm embrace. We petition you once more in this celebration. We pray for divine favor upon our President, Joseph R. Biden, and our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and their family. We further ask that you would extend the same favor upon our Vice President, Kamala D. Harris, and our Second Gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and their family. More than ever, they and our nation need you. We need you, for in you we discover our common humanity. In our common humanity, we will seek out the wounded and bind their wounds. We will seek healing for those who are sick and diseased. We will mourn our dead. We will befriend the lonely, the least, and the left out. We will share our abundance with those who are hungry. We will do justly to the oppressed, acknowledge sin, and seek forgiveness, thus grasping reconciliation. In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction. We will extend opportunity to those locked out of opportunity. We will make friends of our enemies. We will make friends of our enemies. People, your people, shall no longer raise up weapons against one another. We will rather use our resources for the national good and become a beacon of life and goodwill to the world. And neither shall we learn hatred anymore. We will lie down in peace and not make our neighbors afraid. In you, O God, we discover our humanity. In our humanity, we discover our commonness. Beyond the difference of color, creed, origin, political party, ideology, geography, and personal preferences. We'll become greater stewards of your environment, preserving the land, reaping from it a sustainable harvest, and securing its wonder and miracle-giving power for generations to come. This is our benediction, that from these hallowed grounds, where slaves labored to build this shrine and citadel to liberty and democracy, let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native American to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, from every human being regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, O God. As such, teach us, O God, to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it, lest we miss kingdom's goal. To your glory, majesty, dominion, and power forever. Hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. In the strong name of our collective faith. Amen.
Please remain standing as the Armed Forces Color Guard retires our national colors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated and remain in your seats while the President and official party depart the platform. For safety reasons, your ushers will release your section in an organized manner, following the playing of our national march, The Stars and Stripes Forever.
Thank you all. Thank you. Made a lot of work for you. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great speech. You got to come out here. Say, you're no self.
History moved stuff along, and he talked about that all those young people were protesting and all those young people out there who were registering voters. He said there's a cry for racial justice 400 years in the making, honoring them. So you have a president that can bring in all these young people, can lift up these people of color who are suffering, and still reach out to everybody else. And I thought it was just an extraordinary, beautiful moment for this country, and it was needed today.
This speech was pure Joe Biden, and the people who wrote it with him have worked for him for decades and know him pretty well. And there was one line that really struck me because it could have been a line that you received from your father, your mother. He said, "Here's the thing about life. There's no accounting what fate will deal you." And from that, we understand what fate dealt Joe Biden and how he overcame all of that tragedy in his life. And in a way today, by being so optimistic and saying to us, we must end this uncivil war, here is a man who gave Americans permission to feel good about who we are and what we can become again. And there is... that is something we've heard from Joe Biden over the years, during the campaign. And then there was a moment at the beginning of the inaugural speech that was also pure Biden, where he made a reference to Seamus Heaney, his favorite Irish poet. And he said, this is America's day, history, and hope. And what the poem he is talking about says that the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history can rhyme. And I think that's how he sees this moment for himself, a moment of hope and a moment of history.
It's interesting to see, which is Hillary Clinton, Lady Gaga, we're seeing Bill Clinton, J-Lo speaking with the Obamas. There's Nancy Pelosi, David Axelrod.
Yeah, as someone who I worked with him for several years in the White House, in the campaign before the White House, and so much of what I heard is so familiar to me. That speech was written within the four corners of who Joe Biden is, and who Joe Biden is what the country needs right now: decency, empathy, the things that he emphasized there. I was also interested in that he said every disagreement does not have to be the cause for war. And I think he was not just addressing the country, but his colleagues sitting behind him. And I noticed that he addressed them and said, all my colleagues, we all understand the world is watching.
He also said we must end this uncivil war.
Yes. And I think there was a real, not everybody is going to receive this speech the way he intended. I think there's a real hunger in this country for community. And he is a president, and he is a human being who sees in others common humanity. And this speech was about our common humanity as human beings, our common obligations as Americans to each other, to our children. This was just such a breath of fresh air that we desperately needed after this horrific experience we've just been through.
Senator Elizabeth Warren and former President Obama. Wolf, Joe Biden, 46th President of the United States.
Joe Biden becomes the 46th President of the United States. Donald Trump is now the former President of the United States. He's a private citizen. We're watching what's about to unfold. We're going to see the departure for the Vice President, Mike Pence, and Karen Pence, his wife, and the new Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, and her husband, Doug Emhoff. They're going to escort the now former Vice President to his limousine that's waiting below, and he'll be leaving this area. You know, John, what we heard from the Vice President was so powerful in the sense that he kept saying things along the line, stop the shouting, lower the temperature, unity is the path forward.
Can he sustain it, Wolf? That's a giant challenge with the country so divided, with the Congress so evenly divided. But what a powerful beginning. I think powerful is a great word that you used there. And these images are powerful. Mike Pence, now the former vice president, being escorted out by the new and historic vice president. Let's just watch this play out. Right there. You heard the laughter between the new history-making Vice President Kamala Harris, the former now Vice President Mike Pence. Laughter on the steps of a building. 1 week ago, Donald Trump was impeached for a second time. 2 weeks ago, it was under attack, and some of the Trump supporters going in were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." What an important moment. Again, can Joe Biden's message of unity last? What will happen in the days ahead when he's having policy fights and the like? We will get to all of that. Today is so important in this changing of the guard, and for Democrats watching who may not have a great view of Mike Pence, in the end, he decided it was important to do the right thing. This would traditionally be Donald Trump and Joe Biden walking down those steps. Joe Biden saying thank you and farewell to the former president. Donald Trump, for whatever reason, can insert your own, decided he did not be here. He disrespected tradition, disrespected norms. So instead we see the new vice president, again a history-making vice president, saying farewell, thank you, and sharing a laugh, Wolf, with Mike Pence. Again, after the past 4 years of partisan divide, after the way you see the wave there, as Jake noted earlier, it was just a little more than a week ago, Mike Pence was still trying to support the president's case that there was fraud in the election. Whatever. We can again litigate that another day. On this day and in recent days, he has decided to do the right thing. And here you see just the passing of the torch. It's not the image we're supposed to be seeing. This should be former President Trump getting onto a helicopter to leave town. But he decided he did not want to be part of this great American tradition. Mike Pence came. You see the wave there. Part of what the new president, Joe Biden, is trying to signal, that yes, we're in the middle of these colliding crises, the pandemic, a struggling economy, the political divide, 2 weeks ago today, an attempted insurrection. But can we try? Can we just try to talk to each other, to respect each other, to work out our differences politely? Again, the history there, too, of Kamala Harris, first woman of color as Vice President of the United States. A very important part. What an amazing picture on this powerful day.
It was part of the theme that the President of the United States, President Biden, set, which is basically when he said, "We will get through this together." And then he repeated a line he has often said, and there we see the Vice President and their husband, Doug Emhoff, walking back up these stairs, when he said, "I will fight as hard for those who didn't support me as those who did." Very important effort to try to reestablish some sort of unity in this country, Jake. It's going to be difficult. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. And what could have been a more beautiful demonstration of the idea of hope and a new era of turning a page from a period in this country that was dark and desperate for so many people because of the coronavirus, because of divisions in this country, because of white supremacist violence, because of the violence we saw 2 weeks ago. Then the youngest inaugural poet ever, Amanda Gorman, who is either 22 or 23, we're not quite sure, and just summed up with emotion and beautiful eloquence the idea of what this country came close to losing a couple weeks ago. It's not easy to write an inaugural poem, but she not only did, but she and delivered it with tremendous poise and grace, but she also, it was incredibly relevant and timely.
And it was timely because, according to the New York Times, she was about halfway through it when January 6th happened at the Capitol, and finished the poem that night, inspired or perhaps propelled by what she saw. And there was a line in the poem, "We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy." So much of the poem was directly relevant to what we all experienced 2 weeks ago, and for a 22-year-old to capture that and capture all of the history and the meaning of what our democracy should mean, I think was really extraordinary to see. She's from Los Angeles, has ties to California, like the now Vice President of the United States, and my alma mater, Harvard University. But she's clearly a brilliant wordsmith, able to really capture not just the moment that we're in, but the feeling of anxiety about our democracy, but also hope about what it's supposed to be.
This is hardly poetry, but she was a showstopper. Yeah. It was the kind of thing where she had prose, she had the oratory, and there's
Chris Coons, senator from Delaware,
with Hillary Clinton leaving.
The Clintons are there.
Yep. So we're going to watch this as we talk about Amanda Gorman. But she really just absolutely had everybody's attention because of how fantastic she was, as I was saying, not just in how she wrote the poem, but how she delivered it. We could just sit here all day picking out some of the great lines. One is, "There is always light if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it." I mean, that line alone is just beautiful and so appropriate.
And really just summed up what I think was so distressing in an existential way about what we saw 2 weeks ago. Obviously, witnessing any sort of violence is hideous. But what we saw 2 weeks ago in the same building that we are looking at right now, there's Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, in the same building was an attempt to undermine democracy, an attempt to steal democracy. That's what was being attempted. The domestic terrorists, the MAGA terrorists, were trying to stop the constitutional counting and certification of votes so that Donald Trump would stay as president even though he had lost the election. And her summary of that, her eloquence describing that at an event that celebrated actually the continued strength of that democracy was just beautiful.
Today is also about, as several of the speakers today have mentioned, the fragility of it all.
Yeah.
You know, it's as Joe Biden said in his speech, democracy is precious, democracy is fragile, and at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. But I think today, as we sit here and we watch this incredible ceremony just be completed, it is such a reminder that we came so close.
Yeah, at this hour, democracy has prevailed. That's what's so interesting about that sentence that jumped out at me too, Abby, which is, at this hour it prevailed. Maybe next time it won't.
Yeah, and as you've pointed out repeatedly, had we had a Republican House of Representatives led by Kevin McCarthy, would we be sitting here today discussing a transfer of power, though it was not peaceful? So that is the theme so many people have brought up today.
Sorry about that, Abby. I just want to point out one other thing that Amanda Gorman told NPR. She said when she was looking into how to write this, she said she studied people like Winston Churchill on ways that rhetoric has been used for good. Ways that rhetoric has been used for good. Talk about a study in contrast. That speaks for itself.
Yeah, the challenge, of course, for President Biden and Vice President Harris, as well as those who have stood for democracy, including Majority Leader Schumer and Minority Leader McConnell, is how to deal with a political party, specifically House Republicans, but also some Senate Republicans, that are against democracy, have been acting to undermine it. That's going to be a real challenge going forward. Wolf?
Yeah, it's going to be a huge challenge, despite the words that we just heard from President Biden. Jeff Zeleny is watching all of this unfold. Jeff, I know you've been doing extensive reporting on what we anticipated would be in his remarks, and I think you were right. What we heard was what we anticipated, an effort to try to bring the country together after this long period of partisanship and division.
Wolf, it is exactly what Joe Biden has been talking about since the very moment he got into this race. But no one could have imagined the moment this would be today. But I am told that since Election Day on November 3rd, since he became, the absolute victor on November 7th, the speech has grown in one respect. He always knew he would talk about unity. That was a central theme, of course, in his victory speech back in Wilmington, Delaware, on the night of Saturday night, November 7th. But what has changed is truth. So I am told that the theme of truth really emerged in the last several weeks as all of the events transpired, with President Trump questioning the results of the election, and certainly the attack right here 2 weeks ago at this very hour. But truth, I'm told, became a more emerging theme in these recent weeks. It also allowed him to talk about President Trump without uttering his name, without saying his name, without giving him any voice. Again, we know that President Trump is not someone who President Biden obsesses over, but he did want to squarely point out what he believes is a cancer on this country and society, and that is a lack of agreed upon facts and truth. So that is where and how truth became such a central theme of all of this. And I am told, talking with a couple advisors during this ceremony, that this is the reason that President Biden wanted to deliver this address outside here, looking out over the National Mall. He was urged by some to have his address inside the Capitol, as Ronald Reagan did when it was so cold in his second inaugural, but he wanted to do it outside to project a sense of normalcy, to talk about history. So President Biden prevailed on that, and the sun started shining during his ceremony, Wolf. Now he's still in the Capitol here, and the hard work begins.
The hard work begins. In fact, some of that hard work is going to begin later today. This day is only just beginning. They're going to be heading over to Arlington Cemetery for a wreath laying over at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And the new president will be there with former presidents Obama, Bush 43, and Clinton. There will also be this huge virtual parade, a parade across America with performers from all 50 states, 6 territories. That will be significant. And then the new president will sign a whole bunch of executive orders, getting rid of several decisions, several policy decisions, executive orders signed by the now former president of the United States. And then later tonight, a primetime performance. It's going to be a celebration and an inaugural concert that CNN will, of course, have live coverage of throughout the night. So our coverage is going to continue for hours and hours, and you're going to want to see this historic day unfold. Jamie Gangel is getting GOP reaction to President Biden's speech. So what are you hearing?
Wolf, I spoke to a half dozen different Republicans, including some former Trump administration officials, and I heard the same thing from all of them, which, quote, phew, we can all exhale. Moving on. One former Trump administration official said...
The new View Sasa app. Sleek, super fast, and gives you so much more. Sasa, unaweza lipia maji, ununue tokens na airtime kwa urahisi, and get paid on expressions when your video gets the most likes. Plus hours of great content.
You know you can never be with that woman.
They look so cute together.
Sandra doesn't block. Karibu tu na mimi vile King sizimfikia.
Watch ahead or catch up on your favorite show.
I did what I had to do.
Upgrades to the new View Sasa app today. View Sasa. Ni yako sasa.